a cartridge juggernaut that died before its time, and a CD-based game system that is heavily beloved, but also met an unsightly demise. I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games, and today we're gonna put the Atari Jaguar versus the Sega Saturn.
Second Opinion Games.
Tempest 2000, a game that was a must-have for the Atari Jaguar. It plays amazing, and it seems to be built around the controller itself, especially the D-pad. When playing it on the Sega Saturn, you'll notice that there's not that much different at all. Matter of fact, I'm struggling to find any difference whatsoever other than the music being slightly better on the Saturn version. But on the Saturn controller, it doesn't seem to fit the D-pad nearly as well. It almost feels like there's a tiny bit of input lag that just wasn't there on the Jag. Which makes sense because this seems to be the same game that's on the Jaguar, just ported over to the Sega Saturn. So of course they're gonna miss slight nuances in the gameplay. So I kinda have to give the win to the Atari Jaguar. Not that anyone could tell the difference by looking at it. Okay, let's look at one that's not going to be anywhere near the same. Like Area 51 for the Sega Saturn. This is a light gun based game, and the Sega Saturn had an awesome light gun. This was also in the arcades where I could knock it out of the park with just a single token and play through the entire game. On the Saturn, I could almost do the exact same, only my arm gets tired now because I'm a little bit older. There's lots of aliens around every corner, and blowing apart zombies is a heck of a lot of fun. On the Atari Jaguar, we have Jag Zombies, where we have static backgrounds, it's not moving at all, and you're just killing zombies very mindlessly. It also has its fill of bugs and glitches, but keep in mind, this was made by one guy. The Atari Jaguar also does not have a light gun at all, which makes this frustrating to play. I much rather be playing Area 51. However, this was created in the arcades by Atari, so I still give the win to the Saturn by a mile, but Atari gets its props as well. Let's look at a fighting game with Kasumi Ninja for the Atari Jaguar with digitized sprites that's done quite poorly. Also, the controls are absolutely terrible, and sometimes the block just doesn't work at all because you have to hold back, and sometimes projectiles fly too fast for the block to even activate. Also, there's fatalities here, but they're really kind of cheesy and not worth pulling off, but the controller really is the biggest downside about playing this game. Other than the fact that you're playing this game. This is known to be a very bad game, but it's an average fighter for the Jag. Now, over on the Sega Saturn, we have Battle Monsters, which is known for being one of the worst fighters for the system. Digitized sprites, controls that are a little awkward, but you can pull off special moves if you actually take the time to get good at this game. Not that you probably should. You could also jump really high and into this sort of background with just a flick of a quick button press, and then jump down and attack your opponents, which, by the way, are all really cool monsters, so they're actually fun to learn and fun to fight. And the Sega Saturn easily takes the victory, even though this game is kind of crap for the system, but still a lot better than any fighting game for the Jag. Last Gladiators for the Sega Saturn has 4 separate tables. Each one is quite small, and this is entirely skill-based. You never feel cheated in any way, shape, or form, even though some of the tables seem to constantly just want to destroy your balls. But that's where you have to hit the tilt button in order to keep it in gameplay, and you actually have to know how to do that and when to do that in order to, accomplish all the missions to do in this game. It also clearly spells out how to do the missions by pointing giant arrows on the playfield. After a while, if you get good, you can take those off because they are a bit of a visual hindrance to the game. It also has some of the best music I've ever heard in any video game ever. Over on the Atari Jaguar with Ruiner Pinball, you have only 2 different tables. However, these tables are freaking huge, which means this screen is constantly scrolling around just so you could see parts of the playfield, because if it was just shrunk down, you would never be able to figure out what's going on in this game. There's also plenty of voice chatting, even though this is a cartridge-based game. It is a heck of a lot of fun, but the Saturn game is just a lot more like pinball, and let's face it, it's better in every single way. Aliens-based first-person shooters time, and on the Sega Saturn we have Aliens Trilogy, where you play through, I guess, the Aliens movies, but it really doesn't feel like it. You're on a ship, aliens are coming after you, there's some slight music in the background, you pick up your trusty shotgun, and you blast your way through aliens. You gotta be careful because their blood is acid after all, and you don't want to walk through it because you'll get hurt. It's mission-based, which means that as you clear through each level, well then you'll go on to an entirely new sector. Over on the Atari Jaguar, we have Alien vs Predator, where it has no music at all. It's just the hum of the ship, and boy does it ever set the mood for a horrifying experience. Also because you literally have to plow through this huge game all at once. Because if you die, it is game over, which means it's just even more scary. Also, you don't really know where you're going, and the game is huge. So you have to always jump on to different computer terminals, try and pull up your map, which spins, by the way. So if you even print out a walkthrough, you're going to have a hard time making your way through the game. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, though. Also, there are predators that you have to worry about, which can completely destroy you in seconds, so you're gonna want to turn and run at some points in this game. Eventually, you have to actually board a predator ship, though, in which case you better be manned up by that point. You could even play as the aliens and the predators themselves, and they each have their own missions, and this is so darn close. Even though the frame rate isn't quite there for the Atari Jaguar, both these games are pretty darn amazing, and I recommend you pick up each of them. Yeah, I'm calling it a tie. Hang On GP for the Sega Saturn is a motorcycle racing game made entirely of polygons, because that was the theme at the time, and it controls a bit like a hot mess. There's also only 3 tracks to play through, so you better learn them up and down in order to get your money's worth. And I think I want my money back pretty much immediately when I started playing this game. However, Super Burnout on the Atari Jaguar is the entire opposite. It's more of a 2D sprite-based super scaler, and everything moves unbelievably fast, yet you feel like you're in control of your motorcycle at all times. There's a day and night feature, and it just seems to meld beautifully together. There's also a little bit of voice sampling here, like when you defeat a map in record time. Also, there's not just 3 maps here, there is a freaking crap ton of them, and there are tons of bikes to master in this game. There's even a 2-player mode that is quite fun to play, and I cannot recommend the Atari Jaguar enough over the Sega Saturn in this category. NBA Jam Tournament Edition time. Now, of course, the Atari Jaguar completely crushes the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo in NBA Jam. The controls are quite good here. There's a little bit of voice sampling, and the characters actually sprite scale as you move closer or farther away from the screen. Also, when you're on fire, unbelievably satisfying. Over on the Sega Saturn, boy did they ever clean up the graphics. Also, far more voice sampling. The music is even better. The controls, well, okay, not everything can be perfect. The controls are slightly worse. However, they made up for it by making the game slightly easier to play against the computer. So, even though at first I thought I was going to give the win to the Jag, at the end, the Sega Saturn steals the ball. Rayman time, and on the Atari Jaguar, this was going to be a console exclusive. However, because the Jaguar was failing so badly and this game was unbelievably good, they quickly found ports over to the PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn. Now, this does look like a 16-bit game on this system, and it plays like one too. But that's not a bad thing because it's really, really fun. The controls are spot on. You can unlock more power-ups the more you play the game, and it has a save feature on the cartridge, which is unbelievably handy because you're going to want to come back to it after you get so frustrated because it's unbelievably difficult that you're going to want to take the cartridge out and throw it. Also, the cartridge can really take a beating. Over on the Sega Saturn, it looks a little bit prettier, the graphics are brighter, the music is more everything, and also the controls are, again, not as good. What is up with that? With the Sega Saturn repeatedly feeling let down in the controls department. On the Atari Jaguar, everything felt natural. Heck, just crawling, all you have to do is push down at an angle, and you do that. On the Sega Saturn, you have to hit the left and right bumpers to crawl in each direction. That doesn't make any sense. Now, there are some other features on the Saturn that the Jaguar didn't have, like slippery ice level-like substances to slide on, which makes this game feel like a Sonic the Hedgehog game at spots, which just isn't there on the Atari Jaguar. It also had some added lightning effects at spots, which is cool, but doesn't really change the game at all. This is one that I was ready to easily give it to the Saturn, but just because it controls so much better on the Jaguar, I have to recommend that version. Theme Park, two games that play incredibly similar because they're both ports of a PC game. Matter of fact, sometimes when editing this very video, I couldn't remember which one was which one because they look exactly the same. Man, what do you do? Is it another tie? Well, sadly, no. And that's because of one little thing. It's kind of hard to see here on the screen, but when playing this game on a CRT, well, the text is almost unreadable on the Sega Saturn version, and you can read it very clearly on the Atari Jaguar one. So, just for that alone, and actually being able to play it because you could read the words on the screen, the win has to go to the Jag. Okay, final game for all the marbles. Let's look at Magic Carpet on the Sega Saturn, a game where you could fly around this beautiful, nearly open world, blow apart animals, shoot orbs, and do stuff. I'm really not sure what you're supposed to do. The game itself doesn't explain it very well, and also the controls are so unbelievably difficult to get the hang of. I don't think anyone ever has or ever will. Man, I really wanted to love this game, just like Cybermorph for the Atari Jaguar, where the controls are a little funny, at least at first. But the more time you put into it, these controls actually make sense. I'm pulling off maneuvers I never thought I would be able to do with the Atari Jaguar controller. Now, both games do have their drawback, as in you can't see more than like 10 feet in front of you. But on the Atari Jaguar, because the controls are so much better, you can just stop on a dime and turn around, and the power-ups here are so good and satisfying, and when they're spread out across the level, you can't wait to find another one, because again, this game is unbelievably difficult. It's also long, and you usually actually know what to do in this game. There's a radar system that actually works. Man, even though I hated Cybermorph as a kid, and I hated it as a pack-in title, I really began to like it now. Cybermorph doesn't really get the praise that it probably should, just like the Atari Jaguar itself, which is why I give it the win, which means the Atari Jaguar gets the win overall in this versus competition. But of course, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching.
Go, Coach! Great shot!
It's a record!
Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I had a great time making it. I was going to do Primal Rage on this, but my Atari Jaguar version was not working, and the Sega Saturn version of the game is a heck of a lot better in every single way. Also, the Sega Saturn has RPGs galore, which the Atari Jaguar does not have, and I did cherry pick a lot of these games in order to give the Jaguar the win. So that all being said, my God, you don't really have to choose. Pick up both systems. They're both a heck of a lot of fun, and collecting games for them will make you freaking bankrupt. So please leave me a comment in the comment box down below, and until later, I will see you again, guys.